Tim. You're listening to the Niagara Sports Hub with John Mason Brink. I'm your host. I'm with Tim Ward. Tim, how you doing today?
JP, how's your morning so far?
Pretty good. You know, normally on this podcast, we're talking to Mike Fisher about the Dallas Cowboys, and while they, can I say, crap the bed, we're going to switch gears. See what I did there, Tim?
Nice pun.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to bring in our next guest. We're super excited to bring him in. It's Ben Rhodes. He's the 2021 NASCAR Camping World Truck Series champion. Ben, how you doing?
That's it, guys. Man, I love that introduction. It doesn't get old. It's been about 6 or 7 years in the works to get that title.
So, man, that's got to be.
Feels good.
That's awesome.
Good. How humbling was it?
Really humbling, to be honest with you. And, you know, a lot of guys you see, they get the title and the celebrations and all the fun can kind of get to you. But to tell you the truth, there were so many different people that reached out, and I didn't realize so many people were invested in what I do. You know, like a lot of times when you're in the grind of the season, your head's down, you're in the airport, you're traveling here, you're going there, and you're just focused on what needs to be done, and you're just in the grind, you know? And then when everything comes to fruition, everything that you've worked on for so long, like, I don't know, there's a lot of people that I forgot that were around me in the start, and maybe forget is a bad word to say because it makes me sound like a jerk, but it's just been a long journey, right? And sometimes it's good and humbling to realize how many people are invested in what you got going on.
Yeah, for me, I did a little research. I went on your website, and all the information stopped at 2020. I'm like, bro, you just won the truck championship. Come on, let's update that.
Well, it's semi-updated now. It's a constant work in progress. So I'll tell you that website, man. The website game is number one, not fun. And then I'm not tech savvy. So then number two, we race every weekend. So it's like,
I know,
you know, keeping up to date with it's a pain in the butt, but it's semi up to date now. I got stats on there for you. So take a look.
Yeah. Hey,
go ahead, John.
Well, I was going to ask this, you know, speaking of the championship race, I was always curious, what's the game plan going in? What's the strategy? Are you taking the risk? Are you going balls out, or are you kind of wait and see? How's that strategy play out?
You know, I don't think there's a specific strategy that's you can count on year in and year out, right? Like it's a new set of trucks. It's always a new set of competitors in the playoffs. And, you know, I've found that for me, what has been working has been kind of just waiting and seeing, just being very reactive to what's happening around me. There's a quote by some famous fighter, it might be Mike Tyson or Muhammad Ali, or somebody says, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Everybody's got a plan until the green flag starts. And that doesn't hold more true than anywhere else except like Daytona or Talladega. I guess what I'm trying to say is that holds the most true at those two tracks, because as soon as the green flag starts, you're reactive the entire race to what's going on around you. There is no plan. You can make a plan, but somebody else is going to ruin your plan for you.
Yeah, it's on the fly, basically.
Yeah, that's it. It really is. And I found that the more I just kind of react and be calm and not overreact, things tend to work out well. Like this last season, I think we finished more laps than anybody. We had the highest average start, highest average finish, and I felt like I drove the whole season slower than I ever have before.
Oh, okay.
Well,
it's almost like Tim. It's almost like golf. You know, people want to go and smash the golf ball, and that's not really how you approach it. You just, you know, steady swing. I don't know what that means with NASCAR, but I thought I throw it in there.
It's very similar. It's similar mindset for sure.
Yeah.
At least for me.
Yeah.
Well, last year, your championship year, but that's in the rearview mirror. Now you're focused on Daytona. It's only a few weeks away. What's the team working on to get ready for the season opener? And what's new with the 2022 Toyota Tundra package?
Well, that's the thing, right? We've got a lot of work ahead of us. Even now, I mean, Daytona's just a couple weeks away, 3 weeks away. We've got a crazy amount of work still to do, and that's because of the new 2022 Tundra. What that entails is new hood, cowls. Cowling is the section between the hood and the windshield, where the air intake is, and the two cowl flaps that extend out to the sides. So
what's the name of that again?
Cowl, C-O-W-L.
Oh, I thought that was the guy who drove OJ in the white Bronco, Tim.
Yeah.
What was his name?
out Callings.
All right.
Might be the same guy that made it. I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're doing a lot of work right now. On top of that, we've got to redo our lower control arm mounts. We've got to redo the upper shock mounts, which entails a large portion of the chassis being cut off and rebuilt. So there is an incredible amount of work, but we've got a really good team of people doing it. I can tell you, if it was up to me, I don't know if we'd be making it to Daytona. These guys are a lot more skilled than I am.
Well, how much seat time have you had with the new package?
Yeah, none. I mean, theoretically, I'd like to get some, but with NASCAR's rules package, I mean, we show up and we practice the day of the race, and that's it. And I mean, that's due to keep the cost down, right? But for people like me or for rookies in the series, you want practice.
Well, speaking of practice, obviously, most people don't realize this, but NASCAR is a team sport. You've got some great teammates with Johnny, Matt, and Grant. How important is it for the team success to work together so that Thor Sports Racing can have a championship? They've won multiple championships, but how important is that team aspect of NASCAR?
Yeah, it's more important than most people realize. Like, the drivers are the ones that are always in the limelight because our direct actions on the track are what are always scrutinized, right? And a lot of times the stuff that doesn't get caught is during the pit stops. Like, you've got the road crew, that we call it, the mechanics that come with you that work on the trucks. They work on them at the shop. They work on them on the road at the racetrack. Then you've got the pit crew that flies in just to do the pit stops. I mean, that's all they do. They practice and work out all week just to do the pit stops. And you better have a good relationship with that pit crew, because at the end of the day, that 13 seconds that they go over the wall can make or break your entire race weekend. It can make or break your season. I mean, I've had a lot of races over the years that, I've been in the season and the sport now, this series, since 2016 full time. I've done a lot of races, and I can tell you that I've had quite a few that have been lost on pit road. And not knocking the crew, right? We all make mistakes. I've lost even more on the track due to my own mistakes. But that just illustrates perfectly how it's a team sport. You can have a lug knot. Not get put on the truck. Okay, well, that's a fine. You can have a couple that are off, and all of a sudden now your crew chief's ejected. He's not allowed to come to the next race. So he's not even the one, you know what I'm saying? He is penalized for the other guy's mistakes. We're all penalized for each other's mistakes. Whatever I do on the track, if I wreck a truck, the crew back at the shop, they got a ton of work to do, and I better be in there helping and providing beverages and food and, saying sorry, because there's a lot of work and a lot of people that it's deeper than the surface. And, I guess I'm on the surface level, but a lot of people don't see that other stuff that's involved.
You never got caught speeding on pit road, have you?
I've been caught a few times. I think, I've been caught, I think once or twice this year. And I had a few-year gap, actually, between my last speeding penalty. So this year I got a little too aggressive. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I try to really pride myself on that. That's an easy loss right there.
Yeah. Speaking of getting in the sport in 2000 or being in the truck series since 2016, let's go back to the beginning a little bit. How did you get introduced to racing, and how did you get your start?
Yeah. So, well, it's actually funny. I'm going to speak at the local go-kart association's banquet this weekend, and it's the same go-kart association that I raced with when I got my start.
That's
awesome. So I live in Louisville, Kentucky. I grew up racing at Sportstrom Speedway, the Charlestown 4-H Fairgrounds. We went to a place called Lightning Valley, a lot of like local short tracks that race dirt go-karts. So I'm going to that banquet this weekend to talk to kids that were my age. I'm going to be looking at these little kids that were my age when I got into it. And it's funny how it comes full circle. But I started in go-karts. I went to Bandoleros, Legend Cars, late model stock cars. I did some ARCA starts, K&N Pro Series East, Xfinity Series. So I ran 10 races with Junior Motorsports. I shared the 88 car with Dale Jr., Casey Kane, and Kevin Harvick that year. And that was 2015. And then 2016, I'm back in the truck series now. But
I'm sorry, Ben. JP, did you hear the names he just mentioned? Sharing the 88 in the Xfinity?
Mm-hmm.
Those are some Hall of Famers. There's some Hall of Famers there.
It's funny you say that, though, because that's a year that I want to completely forget, right? Like, and I say that not because I was with bad people, but that was 10 races that I feel like I fell back in my career.
Yeah.
2015, I ran the Xfinity Series, and yeah, I had some really big names around me, but
Mhm.
man, that was the roughest season of my life. That's like a year that I hardly ever mention to people. I'm just like, let's just block that out.
So you can drive when you're 15, 2015. You were how old are you? 15, 14?
I was 18. Nice try though.
So hey, I want to dig deeper into that. So when Tim, you and I, when we were kids, we drove go-karts at the
I
local
I did actually micro
funway or
midgets.
tracks and stuff like that. Are you getting? I mean, how does it go from there? How are you getting noticed by people? How does that work?
Yeah, it's family oriented back then.
Okay.
It's like your dad, being your coach, off the field and maybe even on the field if your dad was the coach. It's very family oriented. I went to all the racetracks because my parents had an interest in seeing us do it and they wanted us happy and they knew we enjoyed it. So my dad would leave a list of what to work on the go-kart when I would get home
Ah,
from school. If I wanted to go to the racetrack, that list had to be done. We would clean it, change out motors, change gear. I'd get it all ready for him to put it on the scales and scale it and set it up because that took thinking and my 8-year-old brain couldn't comprehend some of those more advanced philosophies, I guess. So it really took them wanting to do it, me wanting to do it, and a lot of sacrifice on their part. When you're young like that, my world revolved around racing, but I had no clue the money or the time and the effort that it took from a parent to do it. And now I'm about to turn 25 and I'm starting to see everything my dad always taught me and told me about. Like you'll see when you get older. And here I am coming full circle and meeting these little kids that are doing it. And, I have like a huge appreciation for my parents did for me.
I mean, obviously your dad's proud. I mean, how do your parents? I mean, they got to be super jacked and proud of you.
Well, they're the reason that I'm here, and everybody says that. Oh, like they helped you get to that point. Well, if they didn't put in the work, I wouldn't even be here, right? Like I
Mhm.
wouldn't. They had to put in an extraordinary amount of work just for me to even get the opportunity. And I think the early days, the workload was 90% on them, 10% on me, and my 10% was having fun. You know,
Yeah.
so if it wasn't for them knowing how I truly felt and what my dream was and wanting me to live my dream, the love that they had for me, I could toss that out the window because the next step from go-karts is legend cars and bandoleros and that doesn't have to be that step. It could be anything else that's kind of on that rung of the ladder. There's other series and that still takes investment and time from your parents. I mean, they have to put up the cash to get the vehicles. They have to put up the time and the energy and the work ethic and the travel. And, again, if any parent doesn't have the ability, the time, or the love for it, then, your kid's not going to make it, right?
So this weekend you're speaking at the Go-Kart Association, which you raced in as a little kid. There's going to be a lot of little kids there that look up to you, and you're their idol. Who was your idol as a racer growing up?
Yeah, so it's funny you say that. I grew up not having a clue what NASCAR was before I got started racing. So I kind of got to know them through stories of my own family. So I don't come from a racing family at all, but I do have an uncle through marriage who built sprint car engines. He was huge in the sprint car world. When Jeff Gordon was getting his start in sprint cars, he lived with my uncle and my cousin at the time. They built the sprint cars together and they traveled around. So I grew up listening to those stories of the heydays with Jeff Gordon, right? Automatically, I'm hearing these stories about the guy, so I liked him and I started following him, and he kind of became my idol. And back when I was watching it, that was Jeff Gordon's like prime time, maybe a little bit past his prime, if depending on who you talk to. But nevertheless, I loved it and ate it up. So he was my guy.
You had mentioned Martinsville was. I did read this on your website that Martinsville was your favorite track, but you also won twice in Daytona last year, so that's pretty cool. What is it about these tracks that you seem to excel at?
Well, I don't know that I excel at Daytona. I'm just so here's the thing. So since 2016, I've raced at Daytona 6 times. Okay, we finally got one win, but those other 5 races,
Hmm.
I was leading or I was up near the lead at the end of the race and I was in a wreck pretty much every single one of those times.
That
I
happens, though.
actually,
Yeah.
yeah, I actually don't like Daytona for that reason. I mean,
Oh.
you got a better chance of coming out of that race, with a totaled truck and hurt feelings and maybe a hurt body,
Mhm.
than you do being very happy. Like I've left that track angry more often than not. So you kind of have to take the lumps and know that maybe your time's coming one of these days at a
Yeah.
Daytona or Talladega. But Kentucky Speedway used to be my favorite for obvious reasons. It was my local track. I grew up racing there. It's off the schedule now, so I don't know if I necessarily have a favorite. I threw out Martinsville because, well, the short track, and I grew up racing short tracks, so it just kind of it speaks to me a little more.
You've got a win at Darlington. How important was that? And Darlington's a historic track on NASCAR's circuit. So, I mean, getting a win there must have been really cool.
Yeah, very historic. The funny thing is that was the first race back for the Truck Series at Darlington for like a 10-year break. There was a couple guys in our series that had raced there before the prior 10 years. So the veterans, I don't think ran very well. Here I am, no practice, no anything. We show up and we get the win. I just remember how happy like our team owner Duke Thorson was and how happy everybody back at the shop was because they just thought that was like the coolest thing, like bragging rights. We got the first win back at Darlington. You know, it's a crown jewel racetrack and we got it. So I don't know. It was important, don't get me wrong, but I felt like it was more important for the people that had a hand on the program, not just me.
You mentioned earlier you've had select few starts in Xfinity Series. What do you see as the transition in the coming years? Do you see yourself going back to the Xfinity Series? Do you yearn to be in the Cup Series one day, or is trucks where it's at for you?
I get that question a lot by just fans, and I had somebody say, "Hey man, when are you going to run them NASCARs?" I'm like, "Well, I'm in the NASCAR.
Yeah.
I'm in the sport of NASCAR. I'm just not running the
Kind of
Cup
doing
Series."
that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I said I'm NAS trucking right now. I enjoy the NAS trucks, man. They're fun. The races are shorter. The action I feel like is more packed. Everything's just kind of condensed, and the highs and the lows are pretty great because of that. That jam packedness of it. I gotta say, I've got a sour taste in my mouth from the Xfinity Series from the bad races that I did have. Not that I wouldn't run it again. I had an opportunity to run it last year, but it wasn't a winning team. So, I took that opportunity straight to my team owner I'm with now at Thorsport, and he's like, "Man, just focus on us right now. This is where your championship's at." And he told me that you know, six
Yeah.
months before getting the championship. And I've got all the faith in the world in Duke Thorson. I mean, I tell him all the time I wouldn't be racing if it wasn't for him. I got to NASCAR because of the effort of my parents and stuff, but I am staying in NASCAR because of the support of Duke Thorson.
Mhm.
And, I'm extremely, extremely loyal and grateful for the opportunities I have. So if something comes along, if it's not a winning deal, that's going to be hard to even consider. But if it's a winning program, I would immediately take it to Duke and say, "What do you think?" It would have to be like something incredibly good. But to be honest with you, I really have no interest in looking at anything. I mean, I'm enjoying my time so much in the Truck Series. I talked to everybody back in the shop. They're like, "Man, if you could do this 20 more years in the Truck Series, you go down as one of the Hall of Famers just because of the contributions to this series of the sport." I said, "You're right. I mean, that would be incredible if number one, I'd have a career that long, and number two, we could accomplish stuff during that career. That's two separate, topics. But I'm just really happy where I'm at. It would have to be a major deal, and it would have to be kind of like a once in a lifetime thing. And even still, I wouldn't make the decision. I will let Duke make that decision because in a lot of ways, he's kind of like a father to me."
So I'm really good at contributing a couple dumb questions per podcast. Tim can attest to
No,
that. Yeah.
no way.
So going back to Daytona, truck racing they have restrictor plates, is that right? For like
They
Daytona? It's kind
they
of the
do.
similar.
Yeah, and we
Okay.
actually turn more horsepower than the Cup cars at Daytona, but we go
Okay.
slower because of the aerodynamics.
And then we were talking about trucks and cup cars. Other than obviously the design and the aerodynamic, what's the difference in driving those?
Okay, so they're coming out with the new Cup car, right? So
Mhm.
we'll put that one aside because that's different than anything else in NASCAR. But you talk about the one that was ran in 2021 versus what we ran in 2021. Chassis, I mean, they're all constructed out of the same stuff. Now the bodies on the Cup cars were composite. We're switching to a semi-composite build where we have composite nose, hood, tail. The rest of it's sheet metal. They run shocks with what we would call bump stops. So on the shaft that extends out from the shock body, there are springs on that. There's also spacers that we call packer. There's a few different things on that shock, and as it compresses, those springs get pushed into that shock body, and that acts as a suspension component for them. We are switching to that this year, so that's similar in a lot of ways. Their engines are built engines. We have spec motors, so they can turn theirs at 95, 9800 RPM. We'll turn ours 7300 RPM before we hit the chip, the rev limiter. Tubing, it's all tubing constructed. They have frame rails that lead goes in. We have frame rails. I mean, everything's very similar, and the actual construction of them. The difference is the horsepower, the aerodynamics, competition, stuff that's a little harder to see maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of guys making that transition. One that comes to mind is Kyle Busch, very successful. I think you gotta. I mean, you said it left a bitter taste in your mouth. You got to get back and get that good taste back in your mouth, man.
He's from Louisville, so in other words, he's got to get back on that horse, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I made my first cup start last year, so that's a start at least.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Every once in a while, we'll get a question from the audience. This just happens to be my two nephews, Aiden and Jacob Ward, who are big fans of Ben Rhodes, and they asked their uncle if he could ask Ben Rhodes a question for them. So I will give you their question. What is the hardest part of driving a truck, and do you play NASCAR video games to prepare for races?
Well, as far as the video games go, we do. I mean, it depends on who you talk to. Some people call it a video game. It's a simulator that Toyota has developed. I don't even want to know how much money's in this thing. It's ridiculous. But I will go to that. The team will watch from Ohio in their little war room. And I'll tell them what it needs. They'll make changes. It's very, very complex. It's way over my head, and you have to have some sort of engineering degree to probably even be in the room. And I don't. I just went to the School of Hard Knocks with NASCAR, so I'm figuring it out as I go. But those help us prepare. But there's still a huge difference between real life and simulation, So you can simulate all you want, but there's no substitute for real seat time and actually doing it. And then what was the first question? I totally.
What's the hardest part about driving a truck?
Depends on who you ask. Some guys are going to say not wrecking. Some guys are going to say keeping the loud pedal down. And me, I'm going to go with understanding where I need to be on the racetrack at the proper time. Like, people would expect, how to hit your lines or breaking points and all this stuff, right? Like, that should come easy to you if you're a master at your craft. What comes hard to me is reading the subtle signs on the track from other drivers and what they're going to do next and where I need to be at that exact moment. You're basically, for me, I'm trying to know what's going to happen before it actually plays out. Some people say that's why Wayne Gretzky was the best, right? Like, I'm trying to be that Wayne Gretzky. I want to know what's going to happen before it happens. And it's a lot of studying and knowing your competitors to understand that. I
was going to say that a lot of experience plays into that.
A lot of experience and a lot of forward thinking. And I'm still working on the thinking part, but that's really, I think, important for racecraft, not just speed, but just racecraft, like managing your positions.
So we've been to our share of NASCAR events, and I think Tim and I will agree that it is the most fan-friendly sport that we've been to. We've been in pit road, we've been to the press conferences, it's a great experience. And listen, we just met you. We're seeing you for the first time. We've done some research and seen some post-race championship thing. You're a very gregarious, you're charismatic, you're young, you're good looking guy. You are good for NASCAR. You are good for the sport. And can you just talk about how the fan interaction is so important to you and the sport of NASCAR?
Well, that's the whole. If you want to talk about the business of NASCAR, the world as we know it is changing. Look at us. We're on computers now talking, and it seems like everybody works from home now, and everything's going digital. The days of companies just throwing, exuberant amounts of cash at the sport because they need to get their name on something and it's better than a billboard or an ad in the newspaper. Like that, the world has changed. You're competing with TikTok influencers. You're competing with YouTube stars. You're competing with other sports. You're competing with ads on social media now, Google ads. Everything's targeted off of data. So fan interaction to me is like where all the magic happens. If you don't have the fan interaction, well, where's the loyalty come from? And if there's no loyalty, then why should a sponsor spend any money in the sport, right? And history has shown that NASCAR fans are some of the most loyal there is in all of the sports world. But at the same time, how do you measure that? Like, how do you go and get a metric on, what the ROI is on their investment? What, on just on the truck itself, or maybe it's on TV. We can get numbers on how much ad time they're getting on TV based on what's on the truck and how much where it's at on the frame of the television and all that stuff. But the fan interaction, I think, is the driving force. Like, a lot of times we'll see deals come together in the racing world based solely on the fan interaction. The fact that you can get a driver the day before or after the race or of the race, we can hop on a golf cart and we can go run through miles and miles of campgrounds at the racetrack, and we can
Yeah.
meet tons of people, and you can build something organically.
Yeah.
And then that gets shared on social media, and this gets shared on TV, and it's a snowball and an organic effort. And I mean, the fan interaction from the business side is great, but also I met a lot of really cool people that way, friends that I never would have known of. Like, I've got one lady who lives in Tennessee now. She calls herself my NASCAR grandma. She texts me before and after every race, and she's awesome. They were farmers from Iowa, and I met them at the track.
Well, you're a Louisville guy. I mentioned horse racing. Are you a fan of other sports, college basketball, football? What do you do on your downtime when it comes to relaxing?
Well, funny story. I tried t-ball as a kid. My dad was the coach, so I was sent to the outfield. And t-ball, that never hit a ball to the outfield. So I sat there. I learned really quickly I wasn't good at it. I tried playing, soccer as a kid, wasn't good at it. Horrible best. I was really bad at pretty much every other sport, so it made it hard for me to follow growing up. I guess that goes back to the bad taste, right? So I don't follow very many sports, but I do have interest in sports. I've got a lot of interest in the combat sports, MMA, boxing. I don't follow it like I should, but I've got interest in it. There's also kind of like the action sports that I enjoy. Stuff I'd like to get in would be like windsurfing, kiteboarding.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, you see those guys out on the beach that are, doing that stuff. That's something I've got interest in, and I'm a little bit sporadic if you can't tell.
I was curious though, Ben, if you've got one race to win, any level, any league, what is that race and why?
Any league or any level. Well, the crown jewels of all of motorsports, it's Monaco, Indy 500, Daytona 500, right? Those are like the three. I'm in NASCAR, so it would be easy to say Daytona 500, right?
Yeah.
But I really want to say that I would enjoy the Indy 500. That feels more real to me than saying Monaco. Never been to Monaco, never been to the other hemisphere, never met an F1 person, but Indy I have. Indy I've been to. That seems very real to me. I grew up 2 hours down the road from it. I would love a chance to race the Indy 500 one day.
Tim, listen to this. He might breaking news. Might get him in an Indy car here.
He's going to be another Kurt Busch.
Man, that would be awesome.
I think Kurt was the last one to try the double with 600 on Charlotte and 500 in Indy on the same day.
Yeah, I wouldn't need to do the double. I could just be happy with the trucks and doing the Indy 500 start. Yeah. I would be more prepared, right? I wouldn't have to worry about taking oxygen and fluids on the airplane to Charlotte.
No kidding.
I got one last dumb question for you. I'm sure you mentioned wrecking and, you've had your share of scrapes and things like that. And I look at like what happened to Ryan Newman a couple years ago at Daytona 500, where he was just, I didn't even think there was anybody left in the car. And I always think about this, and I kind of relate it to like surfing. And, you're out there surfing and you get your leg chopped off by a shark. And they've had documentaries where like this young girl gets her leg cut off by a shark and she gets mended up and she's back out and she's back in the water surfing. And I'm like, that's the last place I'd want to be. So how do you do that? Is it mind over matter? Is it mind over fear? How do you get back in a car or a truck after you've gone through something like that?
That's kind of like a multifaceted question, and I got a few different ways to answer it. Like, if you're talking just about injuries, I would much rather be injured physically than mentally. I have had my fair share of concussions, and Dale Jr. retires because of his concussions, right? Like, concussions are no joke. I mean, you cannot get your brain to work the way that it was before, and it's scary to think, how's this going to affect my life? My memory sucks. I can't go outside. I can't leave the basement without sunglasses on and a hood over my head. That's a very scary situation to be in. And over time, you can feel in all of these wrecks, your brain hitting the front of your skull, hits the front of your skull. And
Hmm.
over time, you just know the stuff in here is turning to mush, right? so, so I've become very aware of my health over time just from doing it wrong.
Hmm.
That when you get in wrecks, there's consequences. So I become aware of that, and it's a even better incentive now not to wreck than ever. But I could never give up racing. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
care if I lost my leg to it. I would be finding a way to get back in a race car. Like, to me, racing is what makes life so great. It's one of the things that I love the most. And I've told people this a few times. Like, when I'm in the race car, all is right in the world. I feel like the older I get, the more responsibilities, the more anxiety, the more stress, the more stuff that gets piled on your shoulders. But when I'm in the race truck, the only thing on my shoulders are the harnesses. They're holding me in place. My mind goes blank and I can focus, and nothing else in the world matters. Like, it all just melts away. So for me to ever say I'm not getting in a race car again, well, there had
Yeah.
to be something catastrophic to keep me out, because it's
Yeah.
what I love to do. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I know the risks, and I'm worried about the risks every now and then because of concussions or injuries. But I'm worried about it because how can I get back in a race car? Like, it's what I love to do.
And when you're in the race car, this is another good question to. And you're driving. How long is a normal race? Couple hours, I would imagine. You're never just
Yeah.
thinking about like smallmouth bass fishing on somewhere in right.
No, no. I mean, if you're thinking about anything other than the race, like,
Tim shaking his head.
you're in trouble. So, well, here's the thing. The races are, yeah, they're about an hour and a half, 2 hours long. And there are some where you're just thinking, all you can think is, I can't wait to get out. Like, you're dying in there. The heat is getting to you. The carbon monoxide is getting to you. The different fumes like tire rubber, just everything's getting to you. And I mean, for me, mainly the heat. I've struggled with the heat over the years, and I can count and remember all these races that I'm dying. I gotta get out of the truck. Like, it cannot finish quick enough. And a lot of people don't want to admit that, right? Like, it makes them seem like they're weak or they're not capable of doing their job, but it's the truth. I mean, we all fight that, but golly, if you think about anything else other than trying to get out or the task at hand, you're not probably going to do very well. It's
Hey,
like daydreaming, getting smacked in the head by the ball.
yeah, Tim, I did a ride along with Ward Burton. Ward Burton,
Yeah, I remember you telling me
Close.
about that.
and I must have gone 2 laps, and I was sick to my stomach. So I know what you mean about like getting out. I mean, you guys are used to it, but I was not, and I was getting sick. And he kept looking over. He's like, "Isn't this great?" And I'm like, "How many more laps we got? Because I got to get out of here." So, oh man.
I'm surprised you understood him.
Well, there was
He's a good guy.
his brother Jeff Burton. Real quick, we were at a trade show, and Jeff Burton was representing the product, and someone asked the question: Was the house you were born on, or the house you lived on, was like your room on the west, or what is it, the Virginia border, and then Ward's was on the West Virginia, because they talk so differently.
I mean, I believe it.
Well,
Yeah, like,
Burton, yeah, you gotta talk like that. Yep.
Jeff was an NBCSN announcer. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't. No offense to Ward. I think Ward's very wholesome, and he was definitely good for the sport.
Yeah.
But I don't think. Yeah, I mean, the announcing bit, maybe it would be cool.
That's right.
Well, and it
Well,
seems like a lot of the drivers that are leaving earlier in their careers than many have. Jimmy Johnson, Dale, and some of the others. Clint Boyer just recently, and Tony Stewart. They've left pretty early in their what many would consider. They still had years left to compete, but they decided not to. They're going into the roles as on NBC or Fox or ESPN or whatever it is, and someday, Ben, I could see you doing that.
Thanks,
yeah.
guys. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be cool. It'd keep me fresh in the sport for sure. But man, I don't even want to think about it right yet. The most I want to worry about is maybe doing an occasional interview, but
Yeah.
racing's where it's at for me.
Well, I was going to say we have a small track here in town, Tim. What is it,
Sycamore.
Bob Joe or Joe Bob or the Sycamore Raceway, and it's a dirt track. So you're always welcome to come check it out.
That sounds fun. Yeah, I've been trying to get into dirt racing more actually. I've been talking to Toyota about that this year, running some dirt races, maybe in their midget program.
Well, it's kind of hard not to, Kyle Larson last year winning about every race he stepped into when he got into a sprint or midget car. Christopher Bell, there's a lot of NASCAR drivers that grew up. You talked earlier about Jeff Gordon. That's in my wheelhouse. Jeff Gordon and Tony back in the day running all over Indiana and Iowa and Tennessee and Ohio and Illinois. Watched a lot of races with them in the early 90s. So
Yeah, see, that's the stuff I've got a passion for, and I've never even done dirt, right? But I see how beneficial the cars are to drive for your skill set. And I don't know, I come home from these 22, 23 truck races that I run, and I'm sitting on the couch watching a cup race or watching an Xfinity race or I'm watching a dirt race, and I'm like, I've got to find a way to get in. Like, I belong in a race car. I got to find a way to get in a race car more often. I'm watching everybody else get better, and here I am. So I'm into it.
a few weeks away, Daytona. That's what you're focused on, though. We're looking forward to seeing you out on the racetrack.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Yeah, I mean, heck, maybe we can go back to back, but
there you
it's
go.
Daytona, so I got a better chance of getting wrecked. I'm just being honest.
Ben Rhodes, thanks so much, man. It was so fun. Like I said, you're good for the sport. You're a fast riser in the. I think if you get in a
he's
cup
already
car,
a star, JP. He's already a star.
I'm just saying in the Cup Series. Got to get him in the Cup car. So
I appreciate it, guys. Yeah, thank you. It's been fun, and well, who knows? We'll see what the future holds.
Well, Ben, good luck. We'll be cheering for you at Daytona, and I'll tell my nephews that Uncle Tim got to talk to Ben, and they were excited that they got to ask you a question.
Hey, Tim, you know what? They can actually listen to the podcast, too.
They trust me. They'll listen to the podcast.
All right.
Thanks, Ben.
Take it easy, Ben. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.